The rain poured relentlessly, turning the narrow alley into a slick maze of reflections. 12-year-old Marcus clung tightly to his father's leg as the older man, Officer James King, shielded his son from the chaotic scene unfolding around them. They were supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be a simple meeting with fellow officers. But something had gone terribly wrong. Before we dive into this story, please hit the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. Thank you. These officers, Rick Daniels and Carter Hayes, were not in uniform. They arrived dressed in plain clothes to avoid drawing attention to their meeting. There were 3 men in total, including another corrupt cop who went by the name Frank Malone. They had convened to discuss an ongoing scheme involving stolen evidence and drug trafficking profits. James King was not in full uniform either. He was dressed in plain clothes to blend in and avoid drawing attention while investigating the tip. However, like many off-duty officers, James carried his badge with him for identification purposes. When he stepped into the dimly lit alley to attend the meeting with the other officers, his badge was clipped to his belt, visible enough to reflect the faint light. His badge represented his unwavering commitment to justice, even as he stood against the very people who were supposed to uphold it. The badge's visibility was also deliberate in James's mind. He hoped that showing his badge would remind the officers of their duty and perhaps deter them from violence. Unfortunately, it didn't. James raised his hands, his badge gleaming under the dim streetlight. "Officers, please, let's talk about this. There's a misunderstanding." His voice was steady, his presence commanding. "Misunderstanding?" sneered Officer Rick Daniels, his gun raised. "We know you've been poking around in places you shouldn't. Some of us don't take kindly to cops who don't stick to their own." Marcus, trembling, tried to tug his father back, but James gave him a reassuring squeeze. "Marcus, listen to me. Stay behind me, no matter what." The shot rang out. The last thing Marcus saw before he was dragged away by a concerned bystander was his father's lifeless body hitting the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The cries of outrage and disbelief were drowned out by the sound of sirens growing louder. The dirty cops were caught off guard by Marcus's presence. When Rick Daniels fired the fatal shot at James, Marcus's screams drew their attention. Carter Hayes raised his gun to silence Marcus, but Rick stopped him, stating, "We don't need the heat of killing a kid. It's bad enough already." Their decision was fueled by fear. Killing a child would attract immediate public and departmental scrutiny. Instead, they relied on intimidation, believing Marcus would be too traumatized to remember or testify accurately. Frank Malone growled at Marcus, "You didn't see anything. Forget this night, or you'll end up like your father." A bystander, hidden in the shadows, saw the incident unfold and intervened, whisking Marcus away. Immediately they left, before the men could reconsider. That evening, Marcus begged his father to come along. James hesitated but finally agreed, as it was supposed to be a quick meeting with his colleagues. He thought they'd be back home before you know it. James King was 42 years old at the time of his death. He was a seasoned officer with over 15 years of service. Known for his dedication and unshakable moral compass, James had earned the respect of his colleagues, but his refusal to participate in or overlook corruption earned him enemies within the force. Marcus's mother, Lisa King, had passed away from cancer when Marcus was just 8 years old. Since her death, James had become both a father and mother to Marcus, building an incredibly close bond with his son. Lisa's absence left a hole in their lives, but it also strengthened their determination to honor her memory by living with integrity and compassion. James had uncovered a web of corruption within his department involving Rick Daniels, Carter Hayes, and their associates. The officers were skimming money from confiscated drug busts and selling evidence to criminal organizations. James discovered enough evidence to implicate them and was gathering more for a formal report to Internal Affairs. The corrupt officers learned about James's investigation through a mole in the department. They lured him to the alley under the guise of providing more evidence, intending to intimidate him into silence. When James made it clear he wouldn't back down, Rick Daniels made the decision to kill him, stating, "We can't have someone like him ruining everything." 2 decades passed, but the memory never faded. Marcus King was no longer the frightened boy clutching his father's leg. Now a skilled and relentless private investigator, Marcus had spent years quietly building a reputation for exposing corruption. His personal mission had remained the same: find and hold accountable the men who took his father's life. His journey began to bear fruit when he stumbled upon an old police report, heavily redacted but with enough breadcrumbs to piece together the story. The names Rick Daniels and Carter Hayes stood out, and his heart raced as he realized these were the very men who had been in the alley that night. Both had since retired, living comfortably while their dark secrets remained buried. For some reason, Marcus couldn't find anything about the third officer, Officer Frank. He later discovered from investigation after searching about the 3 cops who had worked together in the same precinct 20 years ago. Of the 3, Officer Frank had passed in a ghastly motor accident 5 years ago. Marcus continued to dig deeper, gathering more evidence, and believed he was getting closer to unraveling the truth about his beloved father's killer. Marcus knew the names of these officers through a combination of sharp memory, investigative persistence, and unexpected allies. Even as a 12-year-old, he vividly remembered the heated exchange in the alley that night. The corrupt officers, careless in their confidence, called out to each other by name. Phrases like "Carter, handle this now," or "Frank, get rid of the evidence," stayed etched in his mind. After his father's death, Marcus often overheard whispers within the police department. Sympathetic officers, who suspected foul play, mentioned certain names tied to corruption. These murmurs further reinforced what Marcus had heard that night. As he grew older, even in the force, his determination to uncover the truth intensified. Driven by a need for justice, Marcus delved deep into independent research. He meticulously combed through public records, media reports, and internal documents, piecing together the identities of those involved. Every clue he found pointed to the same individuals. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source, the bystander who had helped Marcus escape the alley that night. This witness, initially too afraid to come forward, later shared crucial details about what they had seen and heard, including the officers' names. With these pieces in place, Marcus was ready to confront the men who had torn his world apart. His certainty was unshakable, and the weight of his evidence ensured there would be no escaping the truth. Posing as a journalist researching systemic corruption, Marcus managed to secure an interview with Rick Daniels. The man, now older and graying, lived in a sprawling estate far removed from the gritty streets he once patrolled. Rick welcomed Marcus into his home with a hint of arrogance, still unaware of who sat across from him. "You ever think about the cases you worked on?" Marcus asked casually, his voice betraying none of the rage simmering beneath the surface. Rick smirked. "Some stick out more than others. You deal with enough scum, and you learn to forget their faces." Marcus clenched his jaw. "And the ones who weren't scum? The innocent ones?" Rick's smirk faltered. "What are you really asking, son?" Before Marcus could press further, Rick's phone rang. His tone shifted, uneasy. "I'll have to cut this short. Something's come up." Marcus left the estate, but not without planting a discreet tracking device on Rick's car. He followed him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, where he saw Rick meeting with Carter Hayes and several other men. The conversation was heated, snippets about old cases and loose ends drifting through the air. Marcus recorded everything. The next phase of his plan required careful execution. He anonymously tipped off a trusted journalist, Emily Vaughn, known for her exposés on police corruption. Together, they orchestrated a public release of a small part of the recording. The fallout was immediate, but it wasn't enough for Marcus. He wanted them to face justice, not just public shame. Rick and Carter, realizing they were exposed, began to panic. They hired enforcers to silence anyone who might testify against them, including Marcus. One night, Marcus returned to his apartment to find it ransacked. A warning note sat on his dining table reads, "Stay out of it, or you'll end up like your father." Marcus's determination only grew stronger. He connected with allies within the police force, including Detective Rachel Summers, a rookie who had idolized his father. Together, they gathered enough evidence to force the district attorney to open an official investigation. The courtroom was packed with journalists, community leaders, and members of the public, all eagerly awaiting the trial of the corrupt officers who had evaded justice for decades. The air buzzed with anticipation as Marcus sat in the front row, his gaze locked on the defendants. Rick Daniels and Carter Hayes, now older but still imposing, sat at the defense table, their expressions ranging from arrogance to thinly veiled apprehension. The trial was explosive. Witness after witness came forward, many emboldened by Marcus's bravery. The prosecutor, Sarah Binney, was a fierce and seasoned attorney known for her unwavering pursuit of justice. She began her opening statement with a firm and deliberate tone. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about a heinous act committed in a dark alley decades ago. It is about a systemic abuse of power, a betrayal of trust, and a young boy who was forced to watch his father, a dedicated police officer, gunned down in cold blood. Today, we seek accountability. The defense attorney, Richard Coleman, a sharp-dressed man with a reputation for defending the indefensible, rose with a confident smirk. His voice dripped with condescension. The prosecution's case hinges on the memories of a traumatized child and speculation decades old. My clients served this city with distinction, and we will show that these accusations are nothing more than a vendetta by a man consumed by grief. The first day of testimony was really tensed. Marcus took the stand and began. "They killed my father," Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "They took an honest man, a hero, and silenced him because he stood for what was right. They thought they buried the truth that night, but here we are." Richard Coleman pounced during cross-examination, his tone sharp. "Mr. King, isn't it true that you were a scared child at the time? Isn't it possible that your memory of events has been clouded by trauma?" Marcus didn't waver. "I was scared, yes. But I remember their faces, their voices, and the way they laughed after pulling the trigger. Trauma doesn't erase the truth, it sears it into your memory." Everyone's eyes in the courtroom were wide open as Marcus produced a small, worn notebook. "This is my father's journal," he said. "He wrote about threats he'd received from these men. He knew they were dangerous." Coleman attempted to object, but the judge allowed the journal as evidence. The damning entries painted a picture of corruption and hostility, strengthening the prosecution's case. The drama escalated when the prosecution called a surprise witness, the bystander who had helped Marcus escape. The witness, an elderly man with a nervous tremor, pointed directly at the defendants. "I saw them that night," he said. "I heard them laughing, talking about how one less good cop won't matter. They didn't care who saw, they thought they were untouchable." The defense scrambled to discredit the witness, but their attempts fell flat. The courtroom grew tense when a former officer took the stand, confessing to participating in covering up the crime. "I was young and scared," the former officer admitted, his voice breaking. "But it's haunted me every day for decades. What they did was wrong, and I can't stay silent anymore." The final evidence was when Emily played the full recording, the damning words of Rick Daniels and Carter Hayes echoing through the chamber. The courtroom gasped. As closing arguments approached, Sarah Binney delivered a searing speech. "These men wore badges, but they acted as criminals. They preyed on their power and silenced those who stood for justice. Today, we have a chance to restore that justice." Richard Coleman tried his best to spin doubt, accusing the prosecution of relying on emotion rather than fact. "This case is a witch hunt, plain and simple. My clients are scapegoats." The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict. When the jury delivered a guilty verdict, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Rick Daniels and Carter Hayes were sentenced to life in prison without parole, their decades of impunity finally coming to an end. The network of corruption crumbled as more arrests followed. As Marcus walked out of the courtroom, he paused, turning to the crowd, with reporters and cameras everywhere. "This isn't just for my father," he said. "It's for every family who deserves justice. The fight doesn't end here." The crowd applauded, their claps echoing with hope and vindication. The drama of the trial, the raw emotions, and the ultimate triumph of truth left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. After the brief speech with the reporters, Marcus stood with his lawyer outside the courthouse, finally allowing himself a moment to breathe. Detective Summers approached him, a smile tugging at her lips. "Your father would be proud." Marcus nodded, holding back tears. This was for him. As he walked away, a young boy approached him, holding out a badge. "Are you Marcus King?" the boy asked. "My dad said you're the bravest man he knows." Marcus knelt, accepting the badge with a small smile. "Your dad's the brave one, kid." For the first time in 2 decades, Marcus felt the weight on his shoulders lift. Justice had been served, and his father's legacy was intact. Did Marcus do the right thing? Share your thoughts in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories.